Hey everyone, the bridge on your instrument is probably crooked. You should check it. Hi everyone, this is Joel Kennedy with Kennedy Violins. Today I want to do a quick video about leaning bridges or crooked bridges. Now, if you play violin, viola, cello, bass, there's a chance that your bridge is crooked. In fact, it probably is a little bit. So what is a crooked bridge? Well, a crooked bridge is a bridge that 99.9% of the time leans towards your fingerboard, meaning it doesn't stand straight up and down. Now, pretty much all bridges will begin to lean at some point because every time you do an adjustment to your strings, whether it's big or small, when you tighten the pegs on your instrument, it will start to pull your bridge towards the fingerboard or the pegs that you're turning. So all bridges should be checked once in a while to make sure that your bridge is standing straight up. I would recommend that you check your bridge at least once a month, and definitely every time that you do a large adjustment to your strings, like they're really out of tune, or when you put new sets of strings on, because that'll definitely make your bridge go really, really crooked. So there's three primary reasons why you want to make sure that your bridge is not leaning towards the fingerboard. The first reason would be that if your bridge is leaning, it changes the height of your bridge, basically. And this will change the height of the strings above your fingerboard. Now, you don't want the height above the strings above your fingerboard to be reduced, because the closer that your fingers are to the fingerboard means that there's more of a chance that the strings will contact the fingerboard when you're playing, especially in the upper positions. So if you're playing in the upper positions and your string starts contacting the top of your fingerboard, it'll start buzzing and making awful noises, and it'll definitely hurt your sound. Now, the second reason you want to make sure that your bridge isn't leaning forward is that your bridge may start to warp, meaning that the shape of the bridge will start to change. Now, this usually happens if your bridge is crooked for a prolonged amount of time. So what happens is that bridge on your instrument, instead of being straight up and down, if it's tilted forward, because of the tension of the strings, it'll start to collapse that bridge, and it'll start to warp, and it'll start to basically bend in the middle of the bridge, or where the hip is in the bridge. It'll start to bend like this. So not only does that change the height of your bridge, which goes back to the first problem that I mentioned, which means it'll reduce the height of your strings above your fingerboard, but it'll also create the situation where your feet of the bridge will not contact the top of your instrument very well. So let's say your bridge starts to warp a little bit like this, and so then you straighten it. Well, now the bottom of the feet of your bridge are not going to contact the top of your instrument very well. Now, the majority of the vibrations from your strings are passed to the sound box of your instrument through the bridge. Now, the bridge contacts the top of your instrument through the feet. So obviously, if your bridge is warped and it's like this, and you straighten it up a little bit, and the feet start to not contact the top of the violin properly, or cello, or bass, or viola, then those vibrations from your strings are not being properly transmitted to the sounding box of your instrument. This will harm your sound. It'll make your sound less focused. Your instrument won't project as well. You'll have a more difficult time playing your notes because it won't be as responsive. There's a whole litany of items that you don't want to be characteristic of your sound that will occur if your bridge is warped and the feet aren't contacting the top of the instrument properly. Now, the third really big reason why you do not want a warped bridge is because if your bridge becomes warped, you'll probably just have to get the bridge replaced. Now, there's a few tricks out there that some people try to, straighten a bridge that's become warped. There's all kinds of, sometimes people will put them in water and they'll put them in the microwave and they'll heat them up and they'll try to restore the bridge to its original, straightness. I've tried a lot of these different tricks. Some of them kind of sort of work, and some of them work, but then they're temporary. So you really don't want a warped bridge, because if you have to have a new bridge made, well, this is expensive, because the only people that can make a new bridge for your instrument are highly skilled luthiers, and highly skilled luthiers, they need to be paid for their time, and it's expensive. It could cost, $100, $200, $300. Kind of depends on your instrument and the level of bridge that you get, the level of technician, luthier who's working on your instrument. So, if you have an instrument that costs, several $1,000s, then, it might represent a small percentage of the overall cost of the instrument. But, if you've got like a student type of violin to intermediate, it costs less than $1,000. Well, if you have to spend $100, $200 on a bridge, this represents actually a pretty significant percentage of the cost of your instrument. So some instances, let's say you have a $200 or $300 violin. Well, you might as well just buy another violin, right? So you don't want a warped bridge. So you definitely want to make sure you check your bridge at least once a month, like I said, and you make sure it's straight up and down. Okay, so fortunately, straightening your bridge is really easy, right? Basically, what you want to do is you want to grab the bridge with your index and thumb on the top of the bridge on both sides. And what you're going to do, and you probably don't even have to loosen the strings. Now, if you're playing a cello or something like that, you might have to loosen your strings a little bit because the tension of the strings is so great on an instrument like a cello, you know. But more than likely, you won't have to loosen the strings. But you want to grab both sides of the bridge firmly between your index and your thumb and just work that bridge back, right? So the feet don't move. You're just moving the top ridge of that bridge. And so when you're checking the bridge, you want to check the back side of the bridge. So the back of the bridge towards the tailpiece needs to be a 90-degree angle with the top of your violin. Now, if your bridge was made properly in the first place, when you look at the front of the bridge or the belly of the bridge, it'll actually look like it's leaning back a little bit. And that's just because of the carving of the belly of the bridge. So really, you're not really looking at the front of the bridge. You actually want to look at the back of the bridge and make sure it's a 90-degree angle. Now, in regards to the feet, right? Now, let's say your bridge is slightly warped. Well, how do you know if it's warped enough that you probably have to have it replaced? Well, you want to look at the feet, right? So I've bent this bridge back so you can see very clearly, you know, what poor contact looks like between the feet of your bridge and the top of the instrument. But I've leaned it back. So let's say your bridge is warped and you make the back of your bridge straight. Well, if you look at the feet, you're going to see a gap underneath the feet. Now, it could be very, very tiny, actually. So you want to look really closely. You want to look really, really closely, and you see if you see a little tiny gap. But the most important thing about your bridge is that there's no gap between those feet. So not only do you want to look at the back of the bridge and make sure it's at 90-degree angle, but you also want to look at the feet. Make sure those feet are contacting the top of your instrument perfectly. If they're not, and it looks like your bridge is pretty much straight up and down, well, that might be a bad sign. So probably, you know, if you're not sure if your bridge is perfectly straight up and down, then look at your feet. Your feet will tell you where the angle of the bridge needs to be. Just make sure that those feet are contacting the top of your instrument perfectly. So guys, like I said, it's important to check your bridge at least once per month to make sure that it's straight up and down. You know, most of the time you can just eye, you know, the back of the bridge and make sure it's that 90, or you can look at the feet and make sure they're contacting the top of the violin, you know, really, really well. But check at least once a month. And always check it when you put a new set of strings on. When you put a new set of strings on, they're going to stretch a lot. So you're going to have to check this bridge every day. Every time you tune your strings for probably a week, make sure you check that bridge every day. Make sure it's straight up and down. And even if you just replace one string, well, that's going to put unequal tension across the ridge of this bridge. So even if you just replace one string, make sure you kind of wiggle that bridge around, get it up nice and straight, when you're tuning it over the next couple days. And that'll help your violin stay in tune as well as preserve your bridge. So guys, I hope this video helps. If you have any other questions or comments, hey, let me know. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and of course that alert bell so you'll get notifications, every time I create a new video. And don't forget, here at Kennedy Violins, we're all players and teachers. So we're always happy to answer any kind of questions you have anytime. Thanks guys.